The battlefield was silent except for the faint crackle of burning metal. Smoke drifted across the ground, hiding shapes of broken machines and shattered weapons. Princess Lirael of the Varian Empire stood alone on a ridge, her silver ceremonial robe torn at the hem, her crown tilted from the shock of the last blast. She held her head high, even though her heart was racing. Her guards had been scattered by the sudden attack from an unknown enemy force. Now she could hear nothing but the distant sound of metal groaning under stress, and the faint hiss of a damaged power core somewhere in the ruins. She had been raised since birth to keep her composure no matter the danger. Her father always told her that a ruler must never show fear, even in front of an enemy. Yet this was not a royal hall, and there was no audience of diplomats to impress. This was the edge of a war zone. The air was thick with heat and dust, pieces of steel and blackened stone lay around her like the bones of a long-dead giant. Through the smoke, she caught sight of movement. A tall figure stepped into view, walking with a steady but heavy pace. The armor he wore was blackened in several places, and the right side of his visor was cracked, showing one determined human eye. She had seen humans before, but always in controlled diplomatic meetings. This one was different. His armor was marked by fresh battle. His weapon was still in his hand, and his stance was not one of ceremony, but of survival. Lirael's first instinct was to step back. She had been told that humans were unpredictable. The stories among her people said they could be both reckless and stubborn, and no one could tell if they acted from honor or from their own strange sense of pride. She wondered what this one would do now that he had found her, a vulnerable alien princess without her guards. The man stopped a few paces away and looked at her carefully. His voice, when it came, was steady and low. "You should not be here. It is not safe." Lirael lifted her chin. "I am aware. My escort was destroyed in the attack." She studied him closely, searching for signs of threat. "And you are Daniel," he said. "Human Defense Force." Before she could answer, a sharp mechanical scream echoed above them. She looked up and saw a war drone, one of the models she recognized from earlier battles. Its black body gleamed in the faint light, and its targeting beam locked on her chest. She froze. She had no weapon, and the drone was too close for her to escape. Daniel moved before she could react. He raised his rifle and fired. The first shot tore through the drone's right stabilizer, and the second shot hit its main power cell. It exploded in midair, raining down sparks and twisted metal that hissed against the ground. The princess stared at him, her thoughts racing. Humans were said to value their own lives above all else. Yet this one had put himself in the path of danger for her. "You saved me," she said at last. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "We need to move. There will be more of them." The princess hesitated. It went against her training to place her safety in the hands of a stranger, especially one from a species her people barely trusted. Yet she could not deny that without him she would already be dead. She extended her hand. "Very well, lead the way." Daniel took her hand briefly, pulling her toward a path between two crumbling buildings. His grip was firm, his movements efficient. He seemed to know exactly where to step. Avoiding unstable ground and listening for distant sounds of enemy approach, they moved quickly, weaving through the remains of a once thriving settlement. Stone archways had collapsed, walls had deep cracks running through them, and broken transport vehicles lay on their sides like fallen beasts. The princess tried to keep up, but her long robe caught on jagged edges of debris. She silently wished she had chosen a simpler outfit for her diplomatic visit. Daniel glanced back at her. "That robe will slow you down. It is a symbol of my station," she replied, slightly breathless. "It is also a signal to anyone looking for a target." He said, "Here, this way." They ducked into the shadow of a half-destroyed wall. Lirael's pulse was still fast from the close call with the drone, but now her mind turned to questions. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You were in danger and unarmed." He said simply. That was enough. His answer was so plain that it caught her off guard. She had expected talk of political advantage or strategic gain, but instead, it sounded like he saw it as a basic duty. She looked at him differently now, wondering if humans truly could act without expecting reward. A sudden burst of static crackled in the air, followed by the distant thump of heavy steps. Daniel stiffened, his gaze moving to the street ahead. He motioned for her to stay low. A patrol of enemy machines was sweeping the area. Their searchlights cut through the smoke, scanning for survivors. Daniel waited until the patrol passed, then led her through a narrow passage to a safer path. Every step made her more aware that this human was not just a warrior, but someone who understood the flow of battle. He moved with purpose, never wasting time, and always keeping her on the safer side of any cover. As they neared the edge of the ruined sector, the princess began to see the faint outline of a bridge. In the distance, if they could cross it, they might reach safer territory. She glanced at Daniel and wondered if their meeting was chance or fate. Either way, she felt certain that this human warrior had just changed the course of her life. The broken streets felt like a maze of danger. Every corner held the possibility of an ambush. Princess Lyrael kept close behind Daniel, her eyes darting to every flicker of movement in the haze. The smoke had begun to thin, revealing more of the wreckage, but that only made the destruction harder to ignore. The air was heavy with the scent of scorched metal and burning fuel. Somewhere above, the low hum of damaged aerial units carried over the rooftops. The princess had walked through war-torn cities before, but this was different. Here, she was not the distant observer arriving with guards and medical aid. Here, she was part of the chaos. Daniel paused, lifting a hand to signal her to stop. He scanned the sky, his rifle ready. Lyrael followed his gaze and felt her breath catch. A war drone dropped from the clouds with deadly precision, its targeting sensors already locking on. This was no standard patrol unit. The machine was larger, heavily armored, and equipped with dual plasma cannons. It made a low, mechanical roar as it descended, its weapons glowing in preparation for a strike. Lyrael's instincts told her to run, but her legs refused to move. The sight of the machine's dark frame and sharp weaponry froze her in place. Daniel moved instantly, stepping in front of her. His armor was already battered, but he held his ground. The drone's first shot tore through a nearby wall, sending a spray of molten fragments across the ground. Daniel raised his rifle, firing in short, controlled bursts. The bullets sparked harmlessly against the drone's outer shell. The princess realized the machine's armor was too strong for a direct hit. She took a step back, trying to think of a way to help, but Daniel seemed to have already made his plan. He waited until the drone adjusted its aim toward him, then sprinted toward a half-collapsed transport vehicle. Stay down, he called to her. Lyrael crouched low, her heart pounding as she watched him grab a fallen metal pipe from the ground. The drone turned to track his movement, its weapon shifting. At the last second, Daniel ducked behind the transport's wreckage and hurled the pipe toward the drone's spinning stabilizer at the rear. The impact sent the drone tilting sideways. In that moment of imbalance, Daniel leaped from cover and fired directly into the exposed joint of its left cannon. The weapon burst apart in a flash of sparks. The drone tried to recover, but its stabilizer spun out of control. Daniel's final shot hit its central power node, and the machine exploded midair, scattering debris across the street. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames where the wreckage landed. Lyrael stood slowly, her eyes fixed on him. She had never seen a human fight like that. With such quick thinking and complete disregard for personal safety, he walked back toward her, lowering his rifle. "You saved me again," she said. He shook his head. "We both survived. That is what matters." She hesitated before speaking again. "You could have left me when you saw the drone." "Many would have. I'm not many," Daniel replied. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness to his words that made her believe him. They moved on, navigating the wreckage until the outlines of buildings began to thin. A river of molten waste flowed through the heart of the ruined district, carrying the heat of battle in its glowing currents. The only way across was a steel bridge that stretched over the dangerous flow. As they approached, Lyrael felt the faint vibration under her feet. It was not the movement of the river below, but the sound of approaching hostiles. Daniel had noticed it too. He adjusted his grip on his rifle and nodded toward the far end of the bridge. "Once we start, we move fast," he said. The bridge was narrow, with sections where the metal had buckled under heat. They began to cross, their footsteps ringing against the steel. The molten waste below hissed and bubbled, releasing bursts of steam. Lirael kept her focus on the far side, but halfway across, enemy fire came from above. A squad of aerial attackers descended, their plasma shots striking the bridge. Daniel positioned himself between Lirael and the incoming fire. Using his shield to deflect the blasts, the impact rattled through his arm. But he kept moving forward. One blast hit the bridge ahead, tearing away a section of the walkway. The gap was wide enough to stop most people in their tracks, but Daniel did not hesitate. He grabbed Lirael's hand and pulled her toward the edge. "Jump," he said. They leaped together. Lirael landed hard but kept her footing. Daniel steadied her, then turned to fire back at the attackers. His shots forced them higher into the air, giving the two a chance to reach the far side. When they finally stepped off the bridge, Lirael looked back at the wreckage. She realized how close she had come to falling into the molten river below. Daniel's quick actions had kept her alive once again. As they entered the cover of a narrow street, the princess spoke quietly. "You risk yourself too easily." Daniel shrugged. "I do what needs to be done." For a moment, they simply walked, the sounds of distant battle fading behind them. Lirael found herself studying him again, trying to understand this human who fought without asking for reward or recognition. She had lived her life surrounded by political games and hidden motives. Yet here was someone who seemed to act with no reason beyond survival and protection. She was beginning to think that perhaps the stories told about humans were incomplete. Daniel led the way toward the old steel bridge that stretched over the molten river. The heat rising from the glowing flow below shimmered in the air like ripples in glass. The metal under their boots felt warm, almost hot enough to burn through their soles. Lirael glanced over the edge only once. Seeing the bright red currents twisting far beneath them, she quickly looked forward again. The bridge was narrow and weathered from years of neglect. Some panels were bent upward, and others sagged from the weight of past battles. Daniel's steps were quick but careful, his eyes scanning the far side. Lirael kept close behind him, holding her robe in one hand so it would not catch on loose metal. They were halfway across when the sharp whine of engines echoed overhead. Daniel's head snapped upward. Several enemy attack crafts were diving toward the bridge, their weapons already armed. A sudden blast struck the far end of the structure, shaking it hard enough that Lirael stumbled. "Move," Daniel called. Stepping in front of her and raising his shield, plasma fire rained down, each impact sending sparks across the walkway. The heat was intense, but Daniel kept his body between her and the attackers. A second blast hit one of the bridge's support beams, and the metal groaned loudly under the strain. Part of the walkway near the far side dropped away completely, leaving a gap too wide to step across. Lirael's heart pounded as she realized they would have to jump. Daniel crouched beside her, speaking quickly over the noise of gunfire. "We get one chance. When I say go, you run and jump. I will be right behind you." Lirael looked at the gap, then at him. Her instincts told her to persist, but there was no time. She nodded once. Daniel signaled her forward. They ran together, their boots clanging against the steel. Enemy fire struck around them, making the bridge shake again. Just before the edge, Daniel shouted, "Now!" Lirael leapt, her robe snapping in the wind. She landed hard on the other side, stumbling but staying upright. Daniel followed immediately, rolling as he hit the ground to absorb the impact. He rose quickly and turned his rifle toward the sky, firing several controlled bursts at the attackers. His shots forced them to pull back, giving the two just enough time to move away from the bridge. Once they reached cover behind a row of broken supply crates, Lirael caught her breath. She looked back at the bridge and saw how the missing section now made it nearly impassable. "If we had been any slower," she began. "We were not," Daniel said, checking the charge on his weapon. His tone was steady, but his armor was scorched in several new places. The enemy ships circled once more, but Daniel's fire and the unstable bridge forced them to retreat toward the clouds. The noise of their engines faded into the distance. Lirael touched her crown lightly, straightening it. "You seem to make impossible things look simple," she said. Daniel shook his head. "It is not about simple. It is about doing what has to be done." They moved forward again, leaving the bridge behind. The streets ahead were quieter, but that quiet felt heavy, as if it was hiding something. Daniel slowed his pace, motioning for Lirael to follow close and stay low. The path took them past a collapsed tower whose shadow stretched across the street. Inside the shadow, the air was cooler, and the sounds of battle were muffled. It was here that Daniel stopped, looking toward the hills beyond the city. "If we make it to the caves there, we can rest and regroup," he said. "The terrain will shield us from aerial scans." Lirael followed his gaze. Seeing the faint outline of rocky slopes in the distance, she felt a spark of hope at the thought of safety, even if temporary. As they left the shadow of the tower, Daniel kept his rifle ready. The heat from the molten river faded as they moved farther away, replaced by the faint scent of dry earth and stone. The princess glanced at him as they walked. "You have risked your life for me more than once today. In my world, that creates a bond," she said quietly. Daniel glanced back at her but said nothing for a moment. "In mine, it means we keep each other alive until the job is done," he replied. For the first time since meeting him, Lirael allowed herself a small smile. She did not know if they would reach the caves without more danger, but she knew she would not face it alone. Daniel led the way toward the old steel bridge that stretched over the molten river. The heat rising from the glowing flow below shimmered in the air like ripples in glass. The metal under their boots felt warm, almost hot enough to burn through their soles. Lirael glanced over the edge only once. Seeing the bright red currents twisting far beneath them, she quickly looked forward again. The bridge was narrow and weathered from years of neglect. Some panels were bent upward, and others sagged from the weight of past battles. Daniel's steps were quick but careful, his eyes scanning the far side. Lirael kept close behind him, holding her robe in one hand so it would not catch on loose metal. They were halfway across when the sharp whine of engines echoed overhead. Daniel's head snapped upward. Several enemy attack crafts were diving toward the bridge, their weapons already armed. A sudden blast struck the far end of the structure, shaking it hard enough that Lirael stumbled. "Move," Daniel called. Stepping in front of her and raising his shield, plasma fire rained down, each impact sending sparks across the walkway. The heat was intense, but Daniel kept his body between her and the attackers. A second blast hit one of the bridge's support beams, and the metal groaned loudly under the strain. Part of the walkway near the far side dropped away completely, leaving a gap too wide to step across. Lirael's heart pounded as she realized they would have to jump. Daniel crouched beside her, speaking quickly over the noise of gunfire. "We get one chance. When I say go, you run and jump. I will be right behind you." Lirael looked at the gap, then at him. Her instincts told her to persist, but there was no time. She nodded once. Daniel signaled her forward. They ran together, their boots clanging against the steel. Enemy fire struck around them, making the bridge shake again. Just before the edge, Daniel shouted, "Now!" Lirael leapt, her robe snapping in the wind. She landed hard on the other side, stumbling but staying upright. Daniel followed immediately, rolling as he hit the ground to absorb the impact. He rose quickly and turned his rifle toward the sky, firing several controlled bursts at the attackers. His shots forced them to pull back, giving the two just enough time to move away from the bridge. Once they reached cover behind a row of broken supply crates, Lirael caught her breath. She looked back at the bridge and saw how the missing section now made it nearly impassable. "If we had been any slower," she began. "We were not," Daniel said, checking the charge on his weapon. His tone was steady, but his armor was scorched in several new places. The enemy ships circled once more, but Daniel's fire and the unstable bridge forced them to retreat toward the clouds. The noise of their engines faded into the distance. Lirael touched her crown lightly, straightening it. "You seem to make impossible things look simple," she said. Daniel shook his head. "It is not about simple. It is about doing what has to be done. They moved forward again, leaving the bridge behind. The streets ahead were quieter, but that quiet felt heavy, as if it was hiding something. Daniel slowed his pace, motioning for Lirael to follow close and stay low. The path took them past a collapsed tower whose shadow stretched across the street. Inside the shadow, the air was cooler, and the sounds of battle were muffled. It was here that Daniel stopped, looking toward the hills beyond the city. If we make it to the caves there, we can rest and regroup, he said. The terrain will shield us from aerial scans. Lirael followed his gaze. Seeing the faint outline of rocky slopes in the distance, she felt a spark of hope at the thought of safety, even if temporary. As they left the shadow of the tower, Daniel kept his rifle ready. The heat from the molten river faded as they moved farther away, replaced by the faint scent of dry earth and stone. The princess glanced at him as they walked. You have risked your life for me more than once today. In my world, that creates a bond, she said quietly. Daniel glanced back at her but said nothing for a moment. In mine, it means we keep each other alive until the job is done, he replied. For the first time since meeting him, Lirael allowed herself a small smile. She did not know if they would reach the caves without more danger, but she knew she would not face it alone. After what felt like hours of careful movement through the ruined streets, Daniel led Princess Lirael toward the foothills at the edge of the city. The jagged rocks rose from the ground, like broken teeth, their surfaces glowing faintly in the light of the molten river behind them. The princess felt relief with every step away from the chaos, though she stayed alert, knowing that danger could still follow. Daniel's pace slowed as they approached a wide cave entrance. Partially hidden by boulders, the shadowed mouth of the cave promised shelter from both enemies and the harsh sun. He gestured toward the opening. We stay here for now. It is safe, at least for a while. Lirael stepped inside, the cool air of the cave brushing against her skin like a gentle wave. She inhaled deeply, enjoying the momentary relief from the burning heat of the city. The cave walls were rough but sturdy, with streaks of mineral veins that caught the dim light in faint green and gold reflections. The ground was uneven, but at least it was solid. Daniel placed his pack down and began inspecting his weapons. He removed his helmet and wiped sweat from his forehead, revealing a human face marked by grit and determination. Lirael watched him quietly, noting the calm way he assessed their surroundings despite the scars on his armor. You are hurt, she said after a moment. She saw a shallow cut on his arm where his armor had been damaged. Daniel looked down and then shrugged. Nothing serious, just a scratch. No scratch can bleed if left alone, she insisted. She took a strip of her robe and carefully handed it to him. Let me help. He hesitated for a moment, then allowed her to bind the wound. Her fingers were gentle as she wrapped the cloth around his arm. She noticed the small movements he made to avoid any pressure on the injury. But he did not persist. Why are you helping me? Lirael asked, her voice quieter now. The cave felt safe enough for her to ask questions she had avoided before. Daniel looked at her, his gaze steady. Because it is the right thing to do. You were in danger, and I can help. That is enough reason. She studied him carefully. Humans in her experience always acted with some gain in mind. Even allies often had hidden motives, yet Daniel's words felt honest. Perhaps not all humans were like the one she had been warned about. Lirael sat down on a flat stone, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her legs. I have never been in a place like this without my guards. I did not think I would survive. Alone, you are not alone, Daniel said simply. Not anymore. For a moment, the two sat in silence, listening to the faint drip of water from the cave walls. The world outside seemed far away, as if the destruction had not reached this quiet space. Then, Daniel spoke again. The attackers were mercenaries. They are hired to cause conflict between humans and aliens. If they succeed, more lives will be lost, and no one will know who is to blame. Lirael frowned. So this attack was planned every step. Daniel replied, but if we survive and warn our people, we can prevent a larger war. That is why it is important that we stay alive. The princess looked at him, seeing determination in his face. She realized that Daniel's courage was not just physical, but also in his mind. He was willing to face overwhelming odds for a goal he believed in, not just for himself. She felt a strange sense of admiration, something she had not expected to feel for a human. Her life had always been about duty, diplomacy, and careful calculations. But here, in the quiet of the cave, she was beginning to understand another kind of strength. Daniel finally relaxed, leaning back against the cool stone wall. "You should rest," he said. "We have both had a long day." Lyrael shook her head. "I cannot rest yet. There's too much to think about. I'm not used to being protected by someone else." "You are learning," Daniel said with a small smile. "It is not weakness to accept help. It is part of survival." She studied his face again. There was no arrogance, no desire for reward, just calm, steady strength. It made her feel safer than she had in a long time. Outside, the faint sounds of the ruined city continued, distant and muffled. But inside the cave, for the first time since the attack began, the princess felt a moment of peace. She allowed herself to lower her guard slightly. Realizing that perhaps she had underestimated humans, Daniel noticed her change in demeanor. "We will rest soon," he said. "Once we are ready, we will plan the next move." Lyrael nodded. She realized that she was beginning to trust him, and that trust was both new and comforting. She had spent so much of her life surrounded by people who acted out of fear or ambition. This human warrior acted from a place of courage and honesty. As they prepared to settle for a short rest, Lyrael glanced at the cave walls, the mineral veins glowing faintly. She felt a strange connection to the world around her, to the quiet strength in the stones and the calm of the sheltered air. Daniel moved quietly, checking the perimeter and ensuring no danger could approach the entrance. The princess finally allowed herself to sit back fully and exhale. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Daniel asked. "For saving me, for keeping me safe, and for showing me that not all humans are as I expected." Daniel nodded. "We are stronger together. That is all that matters right now." Lyrael looked at him, feeling the weight of her own responsibility as a princess. She realized that surviving today would not just be about her own life, but about the possibility of a future where humans and aliens could work together. She did not speak further, but inside, she felt a spark of hope. The war outside might be fierce and dangerous, but here in the cave, she was learning that courage, trust, and human heroics could make a difference. For the first time that day, Princess Lyrael allowed herself to rest, knowing that Daniel's presence beside her meant she was not alone. The journey was far from over, but she understood that together they could face whatever dangers lay ahead. The quiet of the cave did not last long. Daniel had barely finished checking the perimeter when the faint hum of approaching machinery reached his ears. He signaled to Lyrael to stay low, and she crouched beside him, her pulse quickening. The mercenaries who had attacked the city had tracked their movement, and now they were near. Daniel quickly assessed the cave. There were narrow entrances and jagged rock formations that could be used for defense. He grabbed several broken pieces of metal and stone, placing them in strategic positions to create obstacles and traps. Lyrael watched him work, impressed by his calm efficiency. "You have done this before," she said quietly. "Enough times to know how to survive," he replied. "We need to use the cave to our advantage. They will come, and we must be ready." The first wave of attackers entered the cave. The air was filled with the clanking of armor and the hum of energy weapons. Daniel fired a quick shot, hitting a support column that released a small rock fall onto the leading enemy. The distraction gave Lyrael a chance to act. She picked up a fallen energy lance that had been discarded by one of the attackers. Though she had never used it before, instinct guided her hands. The weapon hummed to life, and she aimed it at the next enemy who stepped into view. Her first shot struck true, and the attacker stumbled back, stunned. Daniel nodded, a slight smile on his face. "You learn fast. They move as a team." Daniel used his rifle and shield to keep the attackers pinned, while Lyrael followed behind, using the lance to cut off anyone trying to flank them. The cave echoed with the sound of energy weapons and the movement of metal against rock. Lirel's heart pounded, but her fear was tempered by focus. She realized that Daniel's presence gave her courage. One of the attackers tried to rush them through a narrow side tunnel. Daniel threw a piece of broken metal to block the passage, forcing the enemy to backtrack. Lirel fired her lance, hitting another who tried to sneak past. Together, they created a moving defense, each protecting the other. The mercenaries were skilled, but they had underestimated the combination of human and alien determination. Daniel's strategy and Lirel's quick adaptation allowed them to control the flow of the battle. Each attacker who approached was met with precision and teamwork. At one point, a larger machine entered the cave, its size dwarfing the human and alien fighters. Its legs struck the stone floor, sending vibrations through the ground. Daniel assessed the machine quickly. "We need to collapse the ceiling above it," he said. Lirel nodded. She positioned herself near a support beam that could be triggered. By a small push, Daniel fired at a weakened point in the rock wall. The vibrations caused the beam to fall, striking the larger machine. Sparks and debris flew as it lost balance. With another precise shot, Daniel disabled its control module, and the machine crashed to the ground, motionless. The remaining mercenaries paused. Realizing their advantage was gone, Daniel and Lirel pressed forward, careful but determined. They used the narrow passages to force the attackers into single-file movement, making them easier to defend against. As the battle wore on, Lirel found herself moving with confidence. She was no longer the unarmed princess from the city. She was part of a team, acting with courage and skill. Daniel's calm presence and clear strategy allowed her to focus, turning fear into action. Finally, the last of the attackers attempted to retreat through the main entrance. Daniel raised his shield and fired several precise shots to block their escape. Lirel followed, keeping her lance aimed, ready for any sudden move. The mercenaries, seeing their numbers dwindling and their plans failing, turned back and fled into the rocky terrain outside the cave. The silence returned, heavy but victorious. Daniel lowered his rifle and exhaled slowly. Lirel sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at him with new respect. "We did it," she said quietly. "Yes," Daniel replied. Together, they walked toward the entrance of the cave, seeing the sunlight breaking over the rocky slopes. The city below was still in chaos, but for now, they were safe. Lirel realized that she had survived because of Daniel's skill, courage, and quick thinking. She also understood that she had contributed, standing firm and learning to act under pressure. Daniel turned to her. "You did well. I did not expect you to adapt so quickly." She smiled faintly. "I had a good teacher." The trust between them had grown stronger during the battle. They had faced danger together, each relying on the other, and had come out victorious. Lirel felt a sense of pride, not just for surviving, but for learning to act with courage alongside a human warrior. As they prepared to leave the cave, Daniel checked the perimeter one last time. "We should move," he said. "Other enemies might come, and we need to reach friendly territory." Lirel followed him, her steps lighter despite the exhaustion. The cave had been a place of danger, but also a place of growth. She had faced her fears, learned to fight, and discovered the value of trust and teamwork outside. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting light over the ruined city and the molten river. Daniel and Lirel moved forward, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just a human and an alien princess. They were allies, bound by courage, skill, and the shared experience of surviving the impossible. As they disappeared into the rocky landscape, Lirel felt a quiet determination. The battle had been won, but the war was not over. Yet now, with Daniel by her side, she believed that anything was possible. Together, they could face the dangers of the world and prove that courage, trust, and heroism could cross any boundary. The final stand in the cave had ended in victory, but more importantly, it had forged a bond. Lirel knew that this alliance, born in the heat of battle, would shape the future for both humans and her people. The sun rose higher over the ruined city, casting light across the twisted metal and broken stone. Princess Lyrael and Daniel moved cautiously along the rocky slopes, leaving the cave behind. Though the battle in the cave had been won, she knew they were not yet completely safe. Enemy forces could still appear, and the city was unstable. Daniel led her toward a plateau that overlooked the ruins. From this vantage point, the scope of the destruction was clear. Smoke still rose and thin. Columns from collapsed buildings and the molten river glowed faintly in the early light. Despite the devastation, Lyrael felt a sense of relief. They had survived, and the worst was behind them. "Do you see them?" Daniel asked, pointing toward a distant line of human and alien forces advancing toward the city. Rescue teams had come, alerted by reports of the mercenary attack. Lyrael felt a wave of hope. The combined forces would restore order, and the chaos could finally be controlled. She turned to Daniel. "You have done more than fight," she said softly. "You have kept me alive. That means more than I can say." Daniel shook his head. "We did it together. I could not have done it alone." The two began descending the slope carefully. The plateau ended in a series of rocky steps, and Lyrael followed Daniel's lead, trusting his judgment completely. She noticed that the fear she had felt earlier had transformed into confidence. She was learning that courage was not just a word spoken in halls of diplomacy, but an action that could change the course of events. When they reached the base of the slope, a small contingent of humans and Varian soldiers approached. Lyrael recognized them immediately as part of the Empire's emergency response team. Their commander, a tall Varian named Malric, stepped forward, his eyes widening as he saw the princess alive and unharmed. "Princess Lyrael," Malric exclaimed. "We feared you had been lost in the attack." "I am safe," she said firmly, her voice carrying the calm authority of her position. She looked toward Daniel, who stood quietly beside her, his armor still showing the marks of battle. "Thanks." To him, the soldier's eyes widened as she gestured to Daniel. "This human warrior saved my life. He risked himself repeatedly to protect me and our people. His courage and skill have made the difference between survival and disaster today." Daniel stepped forward, though he tried to remain modest. "I only did what had to be done," he said. "You did more than that," Lyrael replied. "You showed that humans and Varians can work together. That courage and trust are stronger than fear. Today, we survived because of that. Today, a bond was formed that can change the future." The soldiers around them murmured, impressed by the recognition of a human hero by the alien princess. Lyrael's words carried weight. She had authority and respect. And when she spoke of Daniel's bravery, it was not only a personal thanks, but a statement to both forces that humans and Varians could fight side by side. Malric approached Daniel and extended his hand. "On behalf of the Varian Empire, I thank you for your service and bravery. You have earned our respect." Daniel shook his hand firmly, nodding. "Thank you. I only acted as anyone should in the face of danger. We all have a duty to protect life." Lyrael looked at the human warrior beside her and felt a strong sense of pride. Not pride in herself, but pride in the courage of another and the example that Daniel had set. She realized that heroism was not about rank, title, or power. It was about action, about standing firm when others might falter. As the rescue teams organized, Lyrael walked beside Daniel, speaking quietly. "Today proved something important. Humans are not what many of my people feared. You are capable of honor, courage, and loyalty. That matters more than anything." Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope that is true for more than just me." "It will be," she said confidently, "because today you have shown it." The combined forces began to move through the city, securing areas and helping survivors. Lyrael remained close to Daniel, observing how he coordinated with the troops, giving orders calmly and clearly. He was not a commander, yet his example inspired respect. She realized that leadership came in many forms, not only from those born into authority, but from those who acted with intelligence and courage. As the day went on, Lyrael and Daniel worked together to guide the forces through the ruined streets. Each obstacle they overcame reinforced their bond. Every rescued citizen and cleared path became proof that unity could overcome destruction. The city, though battered, began to feel like it could survive. By late afternoon, the last of the mercenary forces had been driven away. The streets were quiet, and the remaining civilians were safe under the protection of human and Varian troops. Lirael and Daniel stood together on a high platform overlooking the city, both tired but unbroken. "You have changed the course of this city's future," Lirael said quietly, turning to Daniel. "Your actions will be remembered, not just by me but by everyone who witnessed today's events, humans and Varians alike." Daniel looked at her. "We only did what was necessary. The city is safe because we worked together." "No," Lirael said firmly. "The city is safe because of your courage. Today proved that one human can make a difference, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Today proved that courage is universal." Daniel smiled, a quiet and humble expression. "Then perhaps there's hope for both our people?" Lirael nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She realized that today had not only saved lives, but also forged a new understanding between humans and Varians. A bond had been formed that could shape the future of both civilizations. As the sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the city, Lirael and Daniel stood side by side. They had survived impossible dangers, fought together, and demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and trust could cross any boundary. The alliance they had formed was not only practical, but symbolic of proof that humanity and alien civilizations could stand together, strong and united. Lirael placed a hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder. "Thank you for showing me what heroism truly is," she said. Daniel nodded. "And thank you for showing me that courage can inspire more than just one life. It can inspire many." The city below them was quiet now, but the story of their actions would be remembered for generations in the hearts of humans and Varians alike. The day would be marked as proof that bravery and cooperation could overcome even the most devastating of attacks. Princess Lirael and Daniel descended from the high platform, walking side by side into the city. Their partnership had been forged in the heat of battle, and now it would guide the recovery and the future. Together, they had survived. Together, they had inspired hope. Together, they had shown the universe the power of heroism and trust. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the city glowed softly in the last light of day. The princess and the human warrior paused, looking at the city they had helped protect. They understood that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where courage, trust, and heroism would shape the world for the better. And in that quiet, golden light, a lasting alliance was born.